Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of DC's Stargirl. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. But first and foremost, let's start off with the opening, where we have, after the events of dealing with Bruce Gordon, we have Starman coming to visit Pat and wanting to apologize, because I brought it up last episode. I was like, it is super messed up for you to bring Pat there to kind of make an accessory to all of this. But he's like, right, like I shouldn't have brought you there. His main reason for doing that is because he was hoping that if he brought Pat there in some shape or form, like maybe before like things had to go down the route it did with Bruce Gordon, that maybe they would be able to find another way, because they always find another way. That's always been their thing, and he hoped having Pat there would do that, but instead, no, they crossed this line. And it's like, he's not trying, like, he's like, he wishes they had found another way to save, they were able to save Bruce Gordon. They're the heroes, but, at the end of the day, they were all scared. They thought they were scared about the people who they cared about being dragged into this, their families. Because family isn't necessarily the family you're born with, it's the family you choose. And in, his case, he chose Pat because Pat was more family to him than anything. It's like, you're not just my friend, you're my brother. Because he talks about the story of, like, he had this watch that his parents gave him as a birthday present. It was just, he woke up and it was kind of on in like a dresser or something for him. And he wore it and someone stole it from him 4 hours later. And he was kind of scared to bring it up to his parents. And he does, and they had no idea what the watch was about because Pat had gotten it for him. You knew that my parents would forget like they did, like they always did. So he went back and got that watch, and he still carries it to that time because it's like, it was so important to him, because it was a reminder of the real family he had, and so he knows what they did will destroy the Justice League, but he hopes like it won't destroy their family, and so, and Pat was like, it's okay. And sadly, that conversation is coming back full circle now, present day, because his family is falling apart now because of this secret he kept. Because he's just like, let me explain, but like for Courtney, it's like, no, that's not going to be like we can't just like explain it away, because we don't really 100% know where Mike stands on it. I think it's more so like, yeah, he doesn't appreciate the lie either, but it's because it's not just like Pat that lied. It was Barbara too. But it's like, yeah, they had their reasoning for doing it, but before they could really get into it too much more, the shade crashes in. It's like, yeah, not the most elegant entrance I've ever made, but basically he's telling them he's actually here to help, because he's always wanted to stop Eclipso, at least it seems like he did. So he's willing to help now, but obviously for Pat, it's like, you can't trust the Shade. He's a villain, which the Shade is like, yes, we've known each other for a long time, Stripesy, and yes, I'm sorry if what I said pushed that partner of yours to kind of cross this line that you guys had before, but all I was doing was simply telling the truth then, just as I am now, because the Shade doesn't have a host. Because even later on, Courtney was kind of saying, like, right, were you worried that if you told me the truth that I was going to go off and kill Cindy Berman or something like that? But it's a heavy burden knowing what the Justice Society of America did. But it's like, no, they need to put the diamond back together, because the moment they put the diamond back together, they'll be able to seal Eclipso away. But they're going to need the light to do it. But the staff isn't strong enough on its own, so Pat figures he knows another source, and that's Jenny, and he has an idea where to track her down. And so there's a conversation between Pat and Barbara about, not knowing if Courtney or Mike will ever forgive them. It's like, all we can do is just like try to earn back their trust, but it's like, but how? They'll try to figure out like one step at a time. So Courtney goes with Pat, and we had the conversation. At first I love the whole like awkward thing of like, oh yeah, someone prepared a cake it was supposed to be for a wedding, but it was ended up being they accidentally sent it to a funeral. Whoa. And it's like, and then the song talking about how sorry they are, and just like had to turn off the radio. And Pat is sorry because, and it brings up a point I brought up last episode that Courtney's like, in this episode, she's like, you should have told us the truth, because like, no more secrets and stuff, like I said, especially something this big. It's like, why didn't you tell us? It's like, because he didn't want her perception, not only the Justice Society of America, how she viewed that, because she held it in such high regards, because being Stargirl meant the world to her, and knowing like she was continuing the legacy of such great heroes, it would have tarnished that, like, right, knowing like your predecessors killed somebody. Yeah, it came down to a vote, and not everyone sided with that. It's like, and she's like, what did you do? And Pat's like, nothing. And that's the problem. I didn't do anything to stop them. That's what his biggest regret is about it, is because for Pat, it's like, even if he didn't partake in it, him not doing anything was him co-signing it in his mind, you know? So he was outvoted in the situation, but also it is a thing of Yolanda. Like, if you had told, like, Yolanda broke down and left because she felt like she didn't deserve to be Wildcat, because, like, she murdered someone. And, you know, if you had told her the truth from the beginning, who knows, like, how different things would be. It's like, but he's like, yeah, but if I told you, like, I was afraid you would believe in everything. And it's like, yeah, maybe we would have, but at the end of the day, it was their choice to decide what to do about that information, you know? So I thought that was fascinating. But also, you know, for Pat, it wasn't just about how she viewed the Justice Society of America. It was also about how she viewed him. He was scared that would change. And she's like, well, it has. Because especially for Pat, it's like, for a long time it took, you know, her to no longer see him as just like, oh, you know, Pat, the guy that my mom's married to, my stepdad. Is like, no, you just became her dad, you know? And he was scared that, like, you know, she wouldn't see him the same way again. And obviously she's upset, and has every right to be, because it's like, we went into this not fully prepared. If we'd known what like, we wouldn't have followed in their footsteps, sure, but that would have motivated them even more of like, right, we're not going to make the same mistake. Like, we're going to find another way to defeat Eclipso. But that's the thing. Who knows? Would it have made things better with Yolanda? Yolanda still would have had to deal with the whole brainwave thing regardless, but her guilt wouldn't have eaten her away at her, at least to this extent. She would have known she wasn't alone. She wouldn't have turned her back on all of this because she felt like she was alone, because it was something that no one else could understand. To be fair, at the time, like, Pat and them didn't know when she initially quit, but it's still the thing of when she did quit, you still didn't say anything either, because I guess for them it's like, at this point, like, it might be even too much to know that, you know, at this point, like, especially the position that the current JSA was and all that. And now, like I said, Yolanda's quit, Rick is in jail, which we get a peek at him in jail. In a moment, someone threw him an apple. In my mind, I was like, was that Yolanda? And now I was stupid. I was like, no, obviously it's Grundy. I was like, that's pretty dope. So at least keeping, you know, I think for Rick, knowing like he's not 100% alone, he was there for Grundy, and Grundy's there for him in this moment. I think that speaks volumes. That means a lot. Kind of not going through this alone, you know. So I think that was kind of a nice touch for him. Obviously, Beth, her parents are kind of concerned with her wearing the goggles all the time, and she's like, yeah, like, you know, these help me see what's real. And it's like, what? They're even saying like, oh, maybe we should get you checked out by an expert or something. But she's kind of talking to herself for a little bit, because she's like, I can't really explain anything. They're like, why not? It's like, well, you didn't really explain the divorce to me, so I think it's safer for you guys not to know anyway. It's a lot to process, and it'd be too much to explain, because they'll just think you're crazy. But then she's about to leave, and they're like, Beth, where are you going? And she's like, you guys told me to go make some friends because you were too busy for me. And now that I have, they need, and I have friends, and they need me right now. Even telling her parents, like, she was kind of saying like some like snappy stuff to him, but basically it's like, right, maybe you guys need to figure out this whole divorce situation. Are you getting divorced or not? Like, that's on you. Like, this is like, I am sad by it, and it sucks, but I've got too much on my plate to deal. Like, this was an issue in its own right, but it's like, yeah, there's too much else to deal with, so they've got to figure that out. And like, having her throw their words back at her to make friends, and she did. And it's like, hearing the, oh, you guys didn't have time, oh, we didn't have time for her. It's like, once again, we still haven't really gotten into why they're getting divorced, like what that's all about. But you know, maybe this will kind of snap them into like finally giving Beth some answers that she's been looking for. But I love that it's like, Mike's like, yeah, like, before like Pat and Courtney left, it's like, who's going to help us? And it's like, and then you have Beth show up. She's like, I'm here to protect you. Mike's looking like, wait, really? Which he goes and sneaks off to go work on Stripe. Which, you know, it's like, right, it's not like working on Legos like he thought it would be. But regardless, he ends up getting a radio signal about like purple lightning. I was like, wait, is it? And it's like, yeah, it's Thunderbolt. So everything's coming full circle. Like they've set up Ginny and Thunderbolt, and now it's like we're coming back to them. And I guess they're going to be, well, because they are down a little bit, because like, well, Yolanda gave back the Wildcat suit. Rick already broke the hourglass, so they're kind of have some 2 extra forces on their side would be nice. I'm curious to see how that plays out, because by the time Mike shows up, he sees like candy everywhere, a giant gumdrop, a giant candy cane, and a house straight out of Hansel and Gretel, you know, the witch that tries to eat them, like a house made out of candy and stuff. So that's kind of running wild, but it's like if you can get him back on your side, then that'll be good. Also, speaking of Beth, circling back, she did give us, because we now find out McNider, like, this kind of throws, obviously my theories have been thrown out for a while about what it was, because I felt like the Shade didn't seem as bad as we thought he was. But it turns out, like, McNider says, like, oh no, he didn't kill me. Like, he didn't try to kill me. In fact, I think he tried to save me. Like, he always played the role of the villain, but he was never, like, down for, like, the ISA trying to kill the JSA. That was never his cup of tea. So he actually kind of saved me, but he actually kind of sucked me into the Shadow realm, and I just can't get out. So he's been there for the past 10 years. And Beth kind of gets some insight from Chuck about learning who the Shade is, and even where he got his powers and his connection to the Black Diamond in that regard. So, but also Barbara's there trying to talk to him of like, you know, who is Emily? And it turned, I said his daughter is actually his sister. That basically because of his powers, he is immortal to an extent, but granted, he got hurt. But now we kind of got more insight into like what that was, because basically it was like a cult. What was it, like the Man of Tears or something like that? I mean, also like the DC universe has a crap ton of like cults and stuff like that, don't they? Like, well, it's in the DC vein, but there's also like because I only know this just because of the teaser, but like the people who captured Dream in Sandman, like that's a cult. The Sisterhood of Dada, that's a thing in what am I thinking of? Doom Patrol. So I was like, man, cults are up the wazoo in the DC universe apparently. So that was kind of interesting. Right, they had to make a sacrifice, and he ended up being their sacrifice. But like, the jewel wasn't enough, fake jewel wasn't enough to hold the energy, so it needed a vessel, and he became the vessel, because they didn't realize at the time the diamond he had on him was a fake, so that it left the jewel that was supposed to house it, because they were trying to like basically summon a god, and they ended up summoning his dark power, and that's how he got his powers. But he talks about like his being around his sister Emily. He tried not to use his powers for bad until she died, because it sounds like she just grew old and died, because he kept staying the same age. He's borderline immortal, so he had to watch her die, and like obviously losing her sent him on a bad path, and hence we are where we are. So in that moment, Barbara starts feeling for him. Once again, like the villains, and I'm sure that's going to strike Barbara, where it's like, right, she was siding with Jordan before she found out who Jordan really was, and she started feeling a little sympathetic for the Shade, you know. But it turns out, Pat's lead to Jenny was about some green fires and like an abandoned orphanage and stuff, and it's like, what's that all about? Obviously, we were like, right, that's about her brother, but they go to the main headquarters of the JSA, which Pat hasn't been there in 10 years, and it's like, even I was kind of like, yeah, it looks a little clean for no one to have been here for 10 years, and he figured that Jenny would be staying there, and she was, but the particular section she's in is Pat and Starman's. Like, apparently everyone has theirs set up, like everyone has their own section like this, but this was Starman and Pat's, and he hasn't been back there, and I think it's just a reminder, just everything that was lost, but everything that they went through. And they find Jenny's stuff, and obviously she's looking for Todd, her brother. And so they go to one of the facilities, which obviously Courtney still has her like, oh, like, I can't tell, like, if you're ever telling me the truth, because, like, how do I know, like, you're never just holding information back? But they run into Jenny, and she was looking for information on her brother, like adoption files, and she lost control of her powers because her powers are tied to her emotions. She was angry, she was frustrated, and sad, and that's what happened. And Pat or Courtney are there for her, and obviously she says like I do, I just did what I did because I was looking for my brother. Like, you do anything for family, And Courtney started looking. Pat kind of looks down because it's just a reminder of, like, the worst timing for that to kind of come up. But this is like, right, doing anything for family is kind of how we got to where we are. But I think at the same time, Courtney's kind of hearing that again from someone else. It's like, yeah, she's willing to protect her family and not cross that line. But it's understandable, like, it's not just about what they did. That's a big part of it, but it's also the fact is that Pat lied about it. Because it does change things, but it is still the thing of like, right, you were just doing all that you could, and obviously you didn't agree with it, and obviously I think she knows that Pat like beats himself up about the fact is that he wasn't able to stop it from happening. So they leave, but we do find out that there's something more going on with that place, because she's under the impression like her brother, like she's like wants to believe that her brother has the same picture as her, so that maybe he's out there looking for her. But that facility, there's something God, like they said the name to it and I can't remember it now off the top of my head, but I'm like, it did seem familiar. Even that symbol for that facility, it seemed familiar. I just wasn't sure what I know it from. I was like, it's a group that sounds like something I'm aware of, but I don't know. But at the end of the day, it seems like they might still have Todd somewhere, like they're experimenting it, because it's like, oh, he's got a sister. Who knew? It's almost like it's a good thing, because now it's like maybe they know about Todd and her being the children of Green Lantern, and they were hoping to use to some advantage. But it's like, right, if he isn't any use, or maybe it's like having both of them will be more useful. So it's like, right, I don't think they'll be coming back. So, or maybe Todd's just being used for some other means. I don't know. But they go back, and obviously Jenny's like, whoa, like, a monster, this Black Diamond, like what else has the JSA going up against? Ghosts? Do they exist? It's like, oh, there's a gentlemanly ghost, which I'm like, what is that in reference to? It's like, I don't think that's in reference to, like, because I'm, like, trying to think, like, what is that in reference to? It's like, because I feel like such an idiot, because I feel like that should be something, like, I don't know if that's something specifically tied to this series of, like, OJSA or something, or whether that's, I'm trying to think, like, is that something that's we would know from the show, or is that like a giant DC reference that's tied to this continuity of the tied to this continuity, but it just hasn't popped up. Because immediately when I'm thinking ghosts in the DC universe, well, speaking of Doom Patrol, or I brought up Doom Patrol earlier, I'm just thinking of the detective agency I became familiar with because of Doom Patrol, which I'm like, man, that show reminds you just like how bonkers the DC universe can get, like how weird it can get. Because like you thought Legends was weird, I think Doom Patrol's on a whole other, like, I mean, they're neck and neck with just how weird they get, but Doom Patrol is like mad freaking weird with just like the deep cuts of DC references and stuff like that. Like you wouldn't even think, I was like, is that really a DC thing? It's like, yeah, what is it, the Dead Boys Detective Agency? I looked it up, that's a thing in the DC comics. That's a real thing too. It's like, man, that seems like a deep obscure cut. Maybe it's not as obscure as I think it is, but nevertheless. So that's what immediately came to my mind. But luckily, with Jenny's help, she was able to focus and put the Black Diamond back together. But it turns out that's what the Shade wanted, because the Black Diamond wasn't put together for the purpose of trapping Eclipso. It's meant to connect this world to the Shadowlands or realms again, so that he could draw upon its power. So now he's back to full, which he regrets lying to Barbara. But it's also put the team in some unforeseen danger, because it turns out, hey, that gem also attracts Eclipso. So that's why I'm like, he wants to take down Eclipso, sure, but I guess it's like he also needed to be back at full strength, because I guess with it sealed off and I guess the darkness was leaking from him, he was going to die, and he is kind of the power-hungry person he is. I think it's like, right, like either it's the power in him that seduced him over all this time, and it's like he's not ready to give up that power. I guess rather than being a full-blown villain, he's more like, I guess he's going to be like the Loki of the DC universe. He's kind of a bit of a trickster, like, oh, I play the role of a villain, and I can be, but I kind of just do whatever I want to. Which I once again kind of brought up. I feel like Loki is actually kind of what that trickster role is kind of also filled by Eclipso too, but I guess it's like, considering like what they're tied to, it kind of makes sense in the grand scheme of things. I just find it fascinating to think about, like, if they both kind of fill that role and how they're connected through this power. Because he did reference, like, oh, your power, like, feels like home. And it's like, hey, because he's from that same world as well that the Shade's power comes from. But obviously, the cosmic staff isn't charged up, and Jenny's ring wasn't enough to put him down. And he sends Courtney to the Shadow Realm, which obviously Midnighter is waiting there. What else will be waiting there? Who knows? But Pat wasn't able... Oh, well, Cindy, because we know she got sent there. So I don't know whether Pat thinks, like, oh, she's dead, or whether it's like, no, she got sent to the Shadow. The moment he talks to Beth, it's going to be like, no, like, Courtney's still alive. We can get to her. We just have to find a way. Like, because even Midnighter was like, I don't know if there's a way out of the Shadow realm, that realm. So you're going to run into Midnighter as well as potentially Cindy. Sadly, she doesn't have the cosmic staff, so that would be helpful in this regard. So who knows what else is waiting for her in that realm, like whatever exists there, you know? So Courtney and Cindy are probably going to have to unlikely duo to survive the situation. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.